Live from the International Debate, Rhetoric, and Argumentation Podcast Research Facility in lovely, livable Rocky Point, New York, this is In the Bin. The number one stop for news and views on debate, rhetoric, argumentation, oratory, all of that stuff. Anywhere fine podcasts are found. Heard worldwide, made with New York pride. We are still the number one and only podcast to cover debate, argumentation, and rhetoric, all from the rhetorical perspective. Welcome, 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 welcome. So good to have you here. So good to have you. Oh, hello. Hello there. Welcome to the facility. In the Bin is available wherever fine podcasts are purveyed. You can get it on Amazon, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and YouTube. And I realized the mistake I made last week, actually the mistake I've made every single week that I've been doing this show, is that I assume Spotify would push the video to YouTube. I think, yeah. Hooray for assumptions. I also need to redo my labeling, I think. Yeah.
Oh.
It's very, very true. But I think I just have it backwards.
Superb.
Got to redo my labeling for this, too. That'll come later. But the big mistake was thinking that the videos would push from Spotify to YouTube. They don't. So now I'm just going to upload them separately. So it might be a little bit of a delay. If you subscribe on Spotify, you'll get it right when it launches in your podcast player. But if you're more of a YouTube person, you want to do it on YouTube, then go to YouTube and you can subscribe there. If you're already subscribed on YouTube, you won't even notice the difference. But if you get it from anywhere else, you won't notice the difference either. But it'd be audio only, I'm pretty sure, because of the way the RSS works on Spotify. So it's part of it. They're pushing me to do video. But I think it's pretty good. I think the video has helped a little bit. I don't know. It scratches the itch for making YouTube videos. And it also helps me make the podcast a little bit more interesting for you. So in this episode of In the Bin, we're going to talk about high school speech and debate, which I think is a wonderful thing. I don't have anything negative to say about it, but I do have some criticisms of the way it is thought about. We are all prisoners, and in some sense, effects of the discourse that we use. I think that's something that almost everybody listening to this can accept as true. We're all prisoners, or at least we're effects of the discourse that we use and that's used around us, and that we, whoa, my arm is disappearing there. Kind of a cool green screen effect. Probably shouldn't have worn this shirt, with the green screen trouble.
Is that your best?
But we are all products of discourse. And we all live within discourse. And whatever we say creates and sustains a particular kind of reality around us. And when we talk about this year's NSDA tournament, it was pointed out to me by a longtime listener and friend of mine that there was some kind of an incident that happened at the NSDA tournament in Iowa, I think is where it was. Something happened where someone got access to the stage when they shouldn't have, and they created a terrifying incident. And so I hope that if you're a listener and you're involved in that, I hope that you're doing okay. This kind of stuff, particularly in the United States in 2025, is a crime and traumatic, even if the person interrupting the event had good intentions, had politically motivated intentions. If they wanted to get up there and talk about how the event was taking necessary attention away from the tragedy in Palestine, or that the event should focus on rejecting the government's use of military force in Iran, even that would not legitimize someone coming up to the stage and acting in a unpredictable or a way where no one really knew what was going on. Now, I don't think, from what I was looking at, that this person had that intention in mind. I think they're just very seriously mentally ill and on a bunch of drugs. That seems to be where the reporting's going. But we'll take a look at that stuff in a minute. But first, I think that incident is kind of the warning flag for the way that speech and debate is talked about and the way it's thought about in the United States. The old Athenian word pharmakon, which is what the sophist Gorgias called rhetoric, is really important here. Not just because there's a connection with the person who interrupted the finals at NSDA, was suspected to be or is allegedly using a lot of drugs, and allegedly, according to some reports I was looking at, self-medicating because of mental illness, perhaps. Nobody's really sure. And the facts still have to come out. The police and the NSDA are remaining quiet because, obviously, you don't want to say things that you don't know if the facts would support or not, if you're a big national organization, especially one as big and that gets as much attention as NSDA. And it's the largest academic competition in the world, I think. I think that's true. Toasty. You wouldn't want to risk losing it all because you said something too soon. You wouldn't want to risk losing what you've worked for years and years and years to build up the financial support to be able to run such a competition and to get the goodwill of major corporate sponsors like the NSDA does in order to run that giant competition. So necessarily they're being quiet about what happened on the stage there. But the pharmakon, that word pharmakon, is a very, very important word. It means, we get the word pharmacy from it, but it means drug or it means poison. It's really difficult to know how to translate it unless you know the context of it in the ancient Greek. But associating it with rhetoric really is a good way of thinking about and applying to what the NSDA is kind of doing. Maybe, I don't want to say too harsh words about them because I like them. I support what they do. I think it's great. I think they're well managed. I think that the board does a great job. I think that running a national competition of that size and that intensity with all of those intense egos of all those high school speech and all those high school debate coaches and all those high school performers and their incredible, they're very demanding people, and they're not afraid to demand what they think is right, which is kind of like the effect of teaching speech and debate to young kids. It's tough to manage an event like that, and they do a phenomenal job. This is the first time anything like this has ever happened. And I've been to a few of them, and never crossed my mind that, you would need some kind of security, but times are changing. But I also think that there's a line we can draw here, and we could say that this event that this person allegedly disrupted and caused all this, he's been arrested and charged with a crime at the NSDA. And I think that's right. But is it outside of the tournament? Is it outside of the speech event? Is it something to the outside of it? Let's take a look. We'll take a look and see what we think about this. We'll take a look at a couple of these videos here. And this is video from somebody's phone of what happened. It's only 18 seconds long or so of what happened.
Run away? Let's go.
That's a pretty terrifying video there. So whatever this person was trying to do.
We have breaking news to tell you
This
about
is the
tonight.
report.
Police have made an arrest in connection to the evacuation of the national speech and debate competition this afternoon.
This is the news report from the local news there.
Is charged with disorderly conduct and 2 counts of possession of a controlled substance. He's being held in the Polk County Jail tonight.
Competition was interrupted today at the National Speech and Debate Tournament after police say Rocafort ran on stage.
A student in the crowd shared this video with us.
Yeah, we've already seen this video. Yeah, but you see there's like, this person is up there. Now, in 2025, even in a speech competition where you feel like you're probably in the safest place in the world, this is a great moment for thinking about rhetoric, because whatever his intention is, if he's trying to protest or he's trying to say we shouldn't be fixated on this speech event because it's just not the appropriate thing to be doing politically, again, I don't think that's what he's doing, but let's give him 100% benefit of the doubt that that's what he's trying to do, is make a political statement. The way he's dressed and his way of approaching can only communicate the motive of a mass shooter. It's like disconnected. He's dressed in a kind of an inappropriate way, suspicious way. He's carrying all these plastic packs, and then he kneels down and goes to open up his backpack.
Somebody did say run away
Yeah,
over
like
the
that.
microphone, and you can see
And then,
people
then people start to flee because the only attitude is, I got to get out of here, from the way that those motives were conveyed. So it's one of these things where, even though this looks like something that's not part and parcel of speech and debate, it really is, under a Burkean sense, one of these things where the motive is the shorthand for a situation. So once the motive is ascribed, this person is up to no good or is acting dangerously, the only situation that comes to mind is mass shooting, because of the way that the United States is organized, or the way that we Americans choose to organize the United States, with very light and open availability of firearms, very light and open availability of weapons, and very, very strict and expensive closed access to mental health and to psychiatric medication. So seems like it should be the other way around, but I don't get to make all those decisions myself. But I can understand why people, and then
getting up and moving away when Rocafort turned around and crouched down.
View.
And that led to a full evacuation of the EMC Expo Center.
KCCI's Pepper Papura is live there for us tonight.
Pepper Papura, what a great name.
People were running out of the building when you first got there earlier this afternoon.
They were, Ben, and they
Pepper
were
Papura,
going
what a great
every
name.
direction,
Love
running
it.
through the streets, running through the parking lots all around this area, all trying to get away from this building here behind me. We talked with some of the people who saw and experienced that chaos as it unfolded.
So one of the things that they say, I don't really want to watch the whole video with you, might eat up too much time, but one of the things that they say is that he got up on the stage and was standing there for 3, 4, 5 minutes, just kind of standing up there. And so no one really thought that this person, well, it's two ways of thinking. Why is someone just allowed to stand up there who looks like they don't belong? And if they are just allowed to stand up there, they must be part of the event in some way. And it's so professionally run. It's run at a very high corporate level that I think if I were there, I wouldn't have any suspicion of anybody being on the stage not supposed to be there. That kind of thing. So let's take a look. There's a really good Reddit post on r/debate. And this person really, really, really put themselves. There's a bunch of posts on what happened. People saying NSDA needs to take more responsibility. Why are they being so quiet? People got hurt. People really got hurt in the exodus. You saw how the videos of panic of running out there. The NSDA needs to take a little bit more responsibility for things. I think they will. I just think that when you're a giant organization, and I think a lot of people don't understand this, when you're a giant organization that has a bunch of national sponsors, you really have to kind of like stay quiet, let the lawyers do their thing, and let the police do their investigation before you can really say anything. And so this Reddit post from Reddit user Hayun Lixer8, I hope I'm saying your Reddit name correctly. This one, this is what happened June 19th, 2025 at Nationals Gone Bad. It's really the best account I've read in looking at all of this, and this great still frame of the person who did this, who's under arrest now. If you look, the picture's getting smaller. That's dumb. Why is it doing that? But if you look at this photo, here's somebody who, just on looking at them, they don't belong. They look like they're up to no good. I mean, I'm not saying they're like, look, these are the motives that are communicated from what we're reading. We're always reading the motives of other people from appearance and from how they look, and this attitude that he's presenting gives us the motives that something is off, that something's not right. And if he wanted to make a statement, maybe he just wanted to make a statement that he doesn't think that the competition is fair. That would be fine. In fact, I think the NSDA would be a great place to have this kind of disruptive, argumentative thing about something about the competition being off. I think it would be welcomed there. I think a lot of the coaches and participants like disruptive discourse. But this kind of disruptive discourse, since we're all kind of in it and we all kind of feel it almost like karma or energy, and it shapes who we are, this kind of discourse creates abject terror. So if he's trying to do something political, if he's trying to critique NSDA, he communicated to the audience that he's going to do something harmful or dangerous. And it might have been, I'm going to surprise you all. I'm going to shock you into realizing what frauds you are. Maybe he thinks of himself as a Caulfield kind of character. But it's just not a good approach. And I think it suggests a kind of a either drug-induced psychosis or perhaps mental illness of some kind. I don't know. I hate what he did. I think it's terrible, but I also kind of feel bad for him. There's something going on there. And this account is really, really pretty scary. And it's a really wonderful account and about the sort of disorder and the people were unclear what was happening. And everybody ran. They dropped their phones. Lots of people got trampled. Lots of people went to the ER. People twisted their ankle, and a lot of people didn't want to go back. The NSDA originally was like, we'll reconvene at 4 o'clock, but then the executive director of the NSDA, I think his name is Scott, he said, no, we'll just do it the next day because we recognize that this was pretty traumatic for people. And it's the same thing as if he really did have a gun. Trauma is trauma, right? According to psychoanalytic takes. But I would read this entire post. I think it's great. It's horrible that it happened, but this is really the best account I've been able to find is on r/debate on Reddit. So, where does this come from? This person was a former national champion. This person was an NSDA product. Now, that's not the only influence on his life, but it's in there. It's something we have to discuss because it's in there. It's part of who he is. It's part of what made him who he was. And I think that there's something a little bit off about the way we talk about speech and debate. There's something a little bit off. And there's a new documentary that I can't wait to watch. But I did see the CBS Sunday Morning, David Begnaud, I've been trying to write something on my blog about him because I think he's an excellent example of kind of irresponsible journalism where you always kind of look for the happy, this kind of journalism where it's all going to be okay kind of journalism, and it doesn't create a kind of kernel panic in the viewer, to use a phrase from computers. It doesn't create a kind of a panic where it's like, okay, I don't really know what the next instruction is. It creates a kind of a comfort, a warm blanket kind of journalism, which I'm not a fan of. But Begnaud does it extremely well, and he's done some really weird pieces that I just don't think are appropriate for the politics that we're living in now. Now, I'm not a journalist, so I don't really know it. I think his journalism is good, but he also just rubs me the wrong way. Like, personally, I just don't care for him. Kind of like Mo Rocca. But Mo Rocca did a great piece last weekend that I hated the fact that he did it because he did it so well. And it made me very angry because I hate Mo Rocca very much. And Begnaud's kind of in that group. So you have to know that I'm laying all my cards on the table here saying that personally I just don't like David Begnaud very much. But he did do a piece. Let's look at this guy who's accused of the guy who was arrested. He was there with the school. Jaden Roccaforte. Yeah, he was charged with disorderly conduct. He was a 2020 national champion in prose reading. I'm not sure why he was there. There were some reports that he was there as a judge or as someone who was helping out his old school. I don't know. They're saying, well, he wasn't really officially there. I mean, we know how these debate meets go. Alums come back and they want to see the new members of the team and be inspirational to them, and they want to help. You know, debate is one of these things, and speech is one of these things where they're like, I got so much out of it, I want to give back. Like, I always kind of felt, I'm not really into like the win everything kind of mentality that a lot of coaches are into. Winning is nice. It's a good metric for how well you're teaching, and also a good way to ask yourself the begged question, what am I teaching? I think it's great. So competition is good in that respect. And you guys all know my feelings on the tournament. I think there's a lot more to be done other than debate tournaments in terms of competition. But they always come back and stuff, and it's not really clear whether there's an official relationship between the school and the school officials. And that gets even hairier when it comes to high school, because when you're a high school teacher, you have a lot more legal culpability, I think, than when you're a university instructor. It's still there, too, for university, but it's very different because you're dealing with adults. You're dealing with legal adults. So if a legal adult decides to leave the hotel in the middle of the night and go to a bar or go to a diner and they get into an altercation with someone, that's on them. Not really on you. But you do have to kind of like do due diligence. You say, well, everyone, signed a waiver, or everyone agreed to these rules of travel as part of the competitive team and things like that. But when you're in high school instructor and students do that, it can be really, really bad. Really bad. So you have to be very careful about who you associate with and who you bring around the non-adult members of the team. But he had no weapons, and he had I don't think he had any ill intent. I wonder if he even knows what he was trying to do. We'll all find out. But the Begno piece has a lot of interesting elements that I think speak to the role or the culpability of discourse in all of this. So we'll watch a little bit about this David Begno thing together.
It's a Monday, and that means it's time for Begno's America.
See, I just hate this kind of journalism so much. It's just so gross.
CBS News contributor David Begno is sharing a story close to his own heart. Just like thousands of students each and every year, David found his voice as a teenager competing in high school speech and debate. You may not be surprised to learn that.
I think the way that it's done, I think there's, when you say speech and debate, I think there's a marketing and PR reason to do that. I think when you say speech and debate, it becomes like a brand name. It's like a branding, and I understand why they do that. But I think that it's important to recognize these things are not the same thing, and there's too much slippage anyway in our discourse between things like dialogue and debate, dialogue and discussion, discussion and debate, speech and debate. It's too much slippage, and it doesn't do society any favors to loop these together. I understand why NSA does it. It's like a branding strategy. I preferred the old one. I understand why they changed their name, but when I was participating in this, it was called the National Forensics League. And forensics, I think, really speaks to that, to the rhetorical element of it. The forensics part is about the past, not about medically researching a murder scene or something like that, which is what a lot of people think forensics means, but it goes back to the past. How do we articulate what happened? How do we discover what happened? We discover what happened in ancient history. We started to try to discover what happened through telling stories about it based on what we had found. And that is at the heart of speech competition and some debate competition, but the speech competition, they focus on original oratory, something I coached not very well, you know. But I did a little bit of that in my high school teaching career, all 5 years of it or whatever. That event's very difficult, but that's a forensic event because people are giving a speech, about a 10-minute speech about how did we get here and what can be done about it. So it switches. It actually goes from the stasis of conjecture, here's what we know, here's how we got here, here's that narrative, to the stasis of policy. Well, what can we do about it? And in the past, original oratory didn't really have a lot of the stasis of policy in it, but the competition has changed and it's gotten even more high stakes, like everything does. Like you look at gymnastics in the Olympics, for example. Any competition is like this. You look at gymnastics, for example, and you look at something that would have gotten a 9.5 or a 10 in the 1950s, and you compare it to what gets a 9.5 or a 10 today, and it just looks like a completely different event. And that's also the story with debate too. But debate is always about policy for the most part. Even the events that are supposed to not be policy, like LD, Lincoln Douglas debate, is still really about policy debate. But anyway, let's watch the rest of the story. I'm going to talk way too much and
David made it all
finish the
way
show.
to the national finals. He discovered the
Unfortunately.
power the sport had to transform his life.
But it's
and the
no
lives
no
of
surprise that David Bednow was a
Hooray!
speech kid.
A culprit could not
That was me in 2000.
He still speaks the same way. It's like that's annoying.
Suddenly,
That annoying
on the
speech
biggest
competitor
stage of my
voice.
life. And it's the same place that Oprah, Brad Pitt, Stephen Colbert, and 3 Supreme Court justices, all in part, got their start.
That's such an interesting argument that these people, something happened in speech competition that allowed them to become who they were. I always make the counter argument that these kind of people are attracted to things that put the spotlight on them because they already have very, very healthy confidence and they really do want to share their opinions and they feel very strongly, but they might not be very good at sharing their opinions, and speech and debate helps them with that. But I always say that there's a lot of successful people who never find it and counter it because of the way it's distributed. It's not distributed in any kind of equitable way through the United States, access to debate and speech events. And nobody's really working on the equitability except for maybe the Urban Debate League, but that's pretty fractured. And it also has its own internal fights as well. It harms it. But it's also modeled on the same problem, which is the pharmacon problem, which we'll get to a bit. Sport is the real problem here. It's modeled on a sport.
High school speech and debate.
Class dismissed.
And as the new documentary, Speak, shows,
the causes, effects, and solutions.
It provides a platform and a purpose.
We live in a country
for teenagers looking to tell their own story. It helped me to find my own voice. Des Moines! And now I'm lucky to be the MC for the tournament every year.
For the first time in the history.
That's the executive director, Scott Munn, I think, or Munn. I don't know. I met him once. He was a very nice guy. But it's interesting. It's like it presents a platform for them to speak, and then they trot out a nice cuts of the most diverse possible speech contestants you could find. I think that kind of diversity is incredibly important, especially using rhetoric to show, hey, we have all this incredible diversity on the stage, but rhetorically, I can make myself appear to be, or you would feel that I'm standing right next to you, or that I have seen the world through your eyes. That's the real power of rhetoric. That's the power of teaching it extremely well and practicing it well, is that you get the best of both worlds. You get all of the diversity and all of the sameness, and then the good rhetoric can move between, look at how similar, look at how different we are, and that creates a very powerful and fertile ground for connection and meaning creation. But here we see how it's, the problem with it is just very highly sportified.
Of the National Speech and Debate Association, we have a 3-time champion in original oratory.
See, it's like this kind of like shouting and cheering is for sports competitions, not for this. Unless you want to make it into a sport. But I think if you do make it into a sport, it can only be a small amount of people. That can't be the entire thing. It has to have other elements to it because it's just so powerful and such a life-changing thing. It's such an important way of being and living in the world. it can't just be a big national competition with big trophies, you know?
That's Esther Oetunji. You are like the Tom Brady of original oratory.
This is the problem.
Thank you.
Who are the top dogs?
Esther.
That's Sam Schaefer and Noah Chaldinova, 2 of 5 students that the film follows as they compete in original oratory.
So it's a 10-minute and 30-second speech where essentially we're trying to convince the audience that there is a certain problem we need to fix in the world.
Politicians.
See, I think that's a great description of the event, and I wish the event really was that. But who is the convince the audience is the big question there. Who's the audience? And I think it runs into the same problem I've been talking about on this show for a very long time, which is you're speaking to an ideal audience, to a vanguard audience, and you're not speaking to a universal audience. There is a way of teaching this where you can have them access universal audience practices. But I do not think that's what happens when you make it a sport and when you make it this incredibly highly complicated and competitive thing where everyone's looking for that kind of Tom Brady excellence. Like he compares her to Tom Brady as a compliment. And if you look at Tom Brady, you look at somebody who can only do like maybe one thing. And they really excel at that one thing, but they do not have any other ability broadly. And that's not oratory. Oratory is the art of being able to conduct civic affairs and make the civic a navigable place for people. And it's all people, not just the people who understand that this is a good, based on stare decisis, this is a good oratory. Because of the oratories that have come before, this one is an excellent oratory. Or because of what oratory is supposed to do, it's a good oratory. Instead of the audience was moved or the audience was convinced. I think there's a world of difference there. And, real audiences don't come to these things. It's a bunch of other participants, other students who compete in speech, other students who compete in debate, and other coaches and teachers. So they all have in their mind this idea of what a very good oratory is. And that's what moves the needle instead of, wow, that's true, right? So I think that there's a world of difference there.
Claim to protect children. Yet 9 million kids live below the poverty line.
The power of speech and debate is that there's so many different perspectives and just so many different life stories. And that's why listening is my favorite part.
We brought the 3 star performers together to listen and talk about speech with Scott One, who runs the National Speech and Debate Association. We all met at the Ron Clark Academy, a Hogwarts-inspired middle school in Atlanta.
Okay, that's embarrassing. Look at that terrible. I don't know if I would want to go to school or learn in a place like that. That's a little Hogwarts-inspired. What does that even mean? You're like trying to take a test and you look up and there's the Emperor. There's Palpatine staring at you, or C-3PO. I don't understand how this is like. I don't know. More to say about that, about what a classroom is, right? Yeah.
When I start speech and debate and I look at my first videos, I'm not the same person like people see up on that stage. And to take someone who was shy but had a lot to say and be able to progress and learn how to, how do I argue for myself and for other people? How do I learn to convey stories and say people's stories in a way that's honest but also ethical? Those aren't skills you get to learn how to do in any other environment but speech and debate. But it's also super competitive because you're competing against the top of the nation.
4th grade.
I think that's such an interest. She's really, really smart about the way she thinks about this thing. And up until when she's like, but it's hyper competitive and you're going against the best. I mean, I don't know. I kind of feel like if you're teaching rhetoric well, every moment in front of every audience is the most hyper competitive because that audience is going to be so incredibly difficult to reach. In our day and age with politics, we're happy to dismiss audiences we can't reach. But that's not what rhetoricians do. That's not what the ancients would think about doing. And there was a lot of criticism about ancients, particularly in Rome, a little bit in Greece, but mostly I think about Rome, of the criticism in the ancients where they would say, look, you're really only speaking to people who want to hear ornamental speech. You're not speaking to the actual decision makers of Rome who are not as highly educated as you. So your poetic turns of phrase only look good to people who believe they look good. And you actually have to kind of get down and dirty in the trenches if you really want to win a lawsuit, if you want to win a case, if you want to win political sway. And as the Republic disintegrated, you kind of saw that. And we're seeing that as the United States Republic disintegrates. We're starting to see that too, is that people who make, very good speeches and stuff are a little bit powerless when it comes to the mob. So it's interesting. She said, I kind of want to hear that again. Can we go back and hear her again?
Argue for myself and for other people. How do I
think she said something really good at the beginning
in
here.
Atlanta.
When I start speech and debate and I look at my first videos, I'm not the same person like people see up on that stage.
Okay, that's very good there, because that's something we've talked about quite a bit in this podcast. And that I've written about is about how participating in debate or any rhetorical exercises, it really alters your subjectivity by unmooring subjectivity from identity, right? So you can identify with your words, but you can also pull apart from that and say, if I say it like this, the audience will identify with it better. And I'm not making a compromise there. I'm making a necessary bridge, because what I have to say is important. And I think a lot of times when people are like, I have a lot to say, I don't know how to say it, what they're trying to articulate is that they cannot divorce identity from subject position. And I think training in speech and debate helps you isolate that subject position from identity in a nice way, to where you're like, I'm not compromising what I believe if I say it in a different way. And I can really stretch that. It's so elastic. There's so much elasticity there. That the recalcitrance is very, very rare. If you're good at rhetoric, you can stretch it very, very far and make a really great path for the audience to come and see things your way. We just don't want to do that hard work. And also, we also feel in our era of truth and facts, and I'm going to speak my truth, and you can't interrupt me. These are my lived experiences kind of nonsense that we teach people. We lose that rhetorical power, and we have a very, very short and brittle rubber band, and the recalcitrance is hard. We feel like we're compromising ourselves when we alter our message for others, and that's extraordinarily dangerous. That's the problem with braver angels, right there, is they have a very stiff and non-elastic mode. They're like, well, you can't really push back on somebody because this is what they believe. It's like, no, we need 100 times more pushback than we normally get in order to train people normally how to become good at rhetoric. And I think it's what she's talking about here. And about the competitive part. It's so competitive, you're going against the best in the nation. And that kind of really pulls the curtain back for me, because it's like, oh, it's not really about audience. It's about being better than these other professional athletes, like the oratory Tom Brady wants to beat the oratory Joe Burrows or whoever, right?
And to take someone who is shy,
I probably got the sports name wrong, and you make fun of me, but that's okay.
Learn how to, how do I argue for myself and for other people? How do I learn to convey stories and say people's stories in a way that's honest but also ethical? Those aren't skills you get to learn how to do in any other environment but speech and debate. But it's also...
See, that's the problem with the competition, is that's the only place you can do it. It's the only place you can do it. Where is this in the curriculum?
So super competitive, because
nowhere in the school
you're competing
curriculum
against the top of the nation. Fourth grade teachers.
And it's also self-selected too. And teachers will be like, you'd be excellent at this. And they identify and pull students out of their class because they want to win. They don't offer it to everyone. I think in a lot of places. And that's kind of dangerous. It should be required curricular, like math. It's as important, if not more important, than mathematical understanding to running a democracy.
Were fatally shot as they shielded their babies from gunfire.
It's like semi-paradoxical in the sense that, you're there because you beat me. You're there because a bunch of people decided you were better at this than I did, and yet I would not have anybody else on the stage than you.
Probably one of the greatest lessons they all learn is how to lose, how to have their thoughts challenged. It's pretty cutthroat, but also pretty awesome.
Doing speech in high school really prepares you for every.
I think that was interesting what Scott One said there. They learn how to lose. I say that all the time. I think learning how to lose is exactly what's good about debate, is it shows you how to live in a democratic system where your best ideas are going to get rejected. And then you still have to cooperate with everybody else who didn't like your ideas. You still have to live together. You can't just, and capitalism cuts against that, which is another part of our contemporary political situation, is that capitalism tells us, oh, we can have the exact life we want if we just pay for it. We don't have to worry about anybody else, but we should worry about everybody else because they're going to come and take our cool stuff. So it's a negative relationship rather than a positive one, where it's like, oh, I really have to cooperate and speak to and work with all these MAGA people or all these liberal snowflakes or pronoun people. depending on what side you are. And you don't want to work with them because you're like, oh, they're idiots. They don't belong. And then that's the end of democracy.
Everything, whether it be a job interview, being able to confront people when you don't feel comfortable in something.
And of course, he used the example of like, this helps with a job interview, which I hate. I don't think that should be what teachers talk about, is like, this helps you get a career in a consumer capitalist society. That's necessary, and you're going to figure that out anyway. I think it's like, we also need to show the alternative ways of living. It's not just for job interview, but how to get your neighborhood where no one knows each other to come together and talk about politics in a way that's productive for everyone.
Something our professional league is like.
Maybe I'm a little too hard on high school kids, huh?
Legislation yanking us backward.
The film features Sam giving a speech about what he sees as the dangers of weaponizing
I do kind of want to watch this documentary. It'd be interesting.
Nostalgic thinking is often cloaked as a morality crisis.
When I watched the movie, I thought, that's a guy who has found what sets his soul on fire.
100%, and it's speech, it's advocacy, and it is.
Well, I think that was a great response, because I think what Begno is saying is like, you chose that topic because you really believe it. And he said, wow, you've really found what sets your soul on fire. He's like, yeah, speech. I don't know if Begno was prepared for that response. Maybe he was a competitor himself. But I think it was a funny moment of really good miscommunication that was productive, because here you have somebody who's like, oh yeah, that topic of nostalgia was awesome. He's like, yeah, I love giving speeches about stuff. It's, it's like, that was the topic du jour. I can make you feel that I'm passionate about anything. I think that's a very, very healthy thing to be teaching everybody, is I can bring the passion on anything that I think is important, but more than that, that's easy. I can make you feel passionate about it, even though you had not thought about it this way before.
Empowering people around me.
And my father's nostalgia for bonfires and brotherhood blinded him to his queer son's reality.
You were very transparent.
I wonder if that's his dad in the back.
ways that I don't think I would have had the courage to be at your age.
I mean, I have speech to thank for that. Speech, like really no other activity, is so subjective and so vulnerable because it's just you.
Listen to us.
That was interesting. I wish they hadn't cut it there, because I'd like to hear him say a little bit more about that. It's so subjective because it's just you. But I think that I like that, but I also feel like that's a product of the sportification of debate, that this is a competitive sport for the elite. So it's just you against all the other elites, and it's so subjective. And rhetoric is definitely not subjective one bit. Sophistic rhetoric, very, very, very not subjective. Everything that is subjective about sophistic rhetoric is made to appear objective. It's something you've been thinking about all along. I can just name it. I can name it, and you didn't have the name, and so now you're with me. But again, maybe I'm being hard on the high school kids. I feel like high school students can learn this stuff. I feel like, and we have evidence for that, so but we'll get to that.
Please.
They can learn the rhetoric the way I'm talking about it, is what I mean.
Is what also allows Noah to perform what I would call a public therapy session. In the film, your intensity is on full display.
Oh, there's nothing that you can...
I know. I get intense, and I think a lot of us get intense because, like, it's a chance to competitively fight for something you believe in.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, too. I think that's connected to maybe why this guy went onto the stage, even though he's not supposed to be there, is he missed that incredible... Like, these people are kind of at the level of professional athletes, and then there's nowhere to go afterwards, so there's nowhere to practice this stuff. Because it's so narrow and judged by these experts in the thing who know what a good audience would say, that approaching public audiences and trying to do it, it doesn't prepare, the NSDA doesn't prepare you for that part. It prepares you for, here's what a really good oratory in front of a Vanguard audience would sound like and look like, and you get rewarded for that. But then you have a view of publics that's a bit below that. And so they're not really worth approaching, because what you know that would work might not work.
I gave a speech where I talked about how my mom died.
Your mother died by suicide.
Yes.
And
Thank you for the language you're using, by the way.
Absolutely. And you were very honest in your speech about it.
How messed up does the world actually have to be
I like these
to
cut scenes
convince a
like
mother
this.
that her son's life, that my life is better without her in it?
I think it's so interesting. This scene in particular, this is really interesting rhetorically, because they have him giving his passionate speech about his mother's suicide and the loss of his mother. Very sad. And then on the other side, you have the red pen, the pen of the corrector. The red pen is the pen of the teacher, making marks on it. So we understand that this is we have a bit of a contradiction here as an interesting inventional sight for the audience where on one hand you have someone speaking from the heart. The ultimate idol of speech is speaking from the heart, articulating beautifully a personal tragedy. Incredibly difficult to do. Nobody can really do this, but this kid, this teenager is doing it amazingly well. But then on the right, we're reminded that this is a formal competition that has rules, and it's a contest because the red pen of the teacher is making marks that we can't read. There are notes here. There's something that needs to be corrected. There's judgment. And then we have the timer on the iPhone that needs a wipe down there. The timer to make sure we're within the limits. So we have the teacher is correcting it. Oh, here's what you did wrong. Here's how you could have paused more. Like the very specific master is taking notes. And so we don't see anything wrong with it, but we are shown that there's something wrong with it. That's all that scene can really convey motives-wise. That's what it conveys, I think. That's my rhetorical criticism of it. And this one is conveying that there's like boundaries. You can't go outside the boundaries, even though this speech is clearly beyond the boundaries of things that we would want to speak about in public. So it's nice contrast and nice bucking up and right up against each other. It's very cool.
What point were you trying to get across?
I hate how
Grown
good David
people,
Begnaud is
like
in
adult
this because I don't
women,
like
would
him.
come up to me and be like, yeah, your mom's going to hell. You are complicit to something that was very, very wrong.
Scott's kind of blown away by the
So I entered the year being
intensity.
like, no, this is a right. Like, we have to respect them. We can't stop suicide by condemning it as evil.
It sounds to me like your speech did as much for you as the point you were trying to make to others.
I mean, it did. Like, it helped me along my grief journey a lot. Like, it took me from somebody who was scorned and just trying to get people to understand that I don't hate my mother because of the way she died. And it took me to somebody who could advocate to keep people on Earth, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's
interesting. So, that's something Freud could tell us too. It helps us to talk about the trauma so we can remain as like the conservative operation of psychoanalysis,
facilitated and really only happened because I was giving the speech.
But don't stop suicide by labeling it as something evil. Stop it by making the alternative life better.
There's all the competitors being like, he just kicked my ass. Look at those faces. They're like, oh, that was great, but you just kicked my ass. I hate it. But that was a great speech, but I hate it.
This is a pathway to train people for leadership.
Yes.
This is a pathway to teach listening, empathy, and it will be the key, I truly believe, over the next 100 years to the success of our world. There's no doubt about it.
People have always said that about debate educators. Debate educators and speech educators have always said that. It's the way leadership is trained, and these are the people who are going to be leading the world and transforming the world. But they said that, I don't know, 30, 40, 50 years ago. And it doesn't really seem to be paying off politically. I don't know. The leaders in business tend to be awful people who don't understand. They have no empathy, all this, and they certainly aren't the winners in this. You see people who are actors. The Supreme Court justices they listed, maybe. But I don't know if it's if that's the thing that really. You could make an argument. You could say, well, they did that, and then they had the confidence to go to law school, and they had confidence to apply for jobs that they wouldn't normally apply for, and this kind of thing. I don't know. It's a Rube Goldberg machine to get there, I feel like. But let's assume that Scott 1 is correct. Why do it like this? Why do it as a incredibly difficult competition to get to that require a lot of resources and a lot of time and a lot of extracurricular stuff that a lot of people just don't have the material comfort zone to participate in? Why do it like this?
Let them speak, because when they speak, they grow, and them growing is what our future needs.
I mean, that's nice. It's a nice promo. But I do think that, like, if he's right, and I'd like to believe that he is right, even though I'm a little bit cynical about that, because everyone's like, debate trains the future leaders. Speech trains the future leaders. Yeah. We've heard that a million times if you're in this world. But we can all list, and I think this Jordan Roccaforte guy, we can all list, he's right there with him, a list of people who were supposed to be the sort of chosen ones, and they kind of went down the Anakin way. And we don't really know why. We can't really articulate it, but we all know some people like that from debate and from speech competition who's kind of like flamed out. Something happened to them or didn't happen to them. And they were attracted to speech and debate in the same way that the people who are the ones who are being showcased here in the oratory documentary as the cream of the crop self-selected and were chosen and practiced this art. You know, this person who's under arrest for disrupting the whole competition and causing huge amounts of trauma and physical injury to the participants was a national champion as well. And there's a lot of people who struggle. I guess if you looked at the percentages of people who did it, you'd probably find the percentages to be along the lines of the national average, I bet. But it's still, from the perspective of somebody interested in sophistry and rhetoric, it's the two sides of the pharmacon. What an addictive drug it is to be involved in competition like that. And then what replaces that? What's the dark side of that kind of driven compulsion? So, looking at a real traumatic incident, the Marjory Stoneman Douglas High School shooting in Parkland in 2018, that had a lot of students who were survivors of that who were the products of a speech and debate curriculum. This is from K to 12 Dive from 2018. And they all went into these debate, drama, journalism, and language arts programs that they're eligible to take. I don't know if it was required or not, but I remember the media saying that they were required to take them made a big difference, or the fact that they were available and it was part of the culture of Marjory Stoneman Douglas gave us the amazing people those amazing young people like Hogg and some of the other ones who I think her name was Emma. Is that right? I probably should have looked that up before I talked on the podcast. But these people were like incredible speakers and speaking in front of thousands of people and speaking on national media about gun violence and about school safety. And they were able to do that because they had this normalized culture of having access to things that not just the dating myself, the NSDA official competitions or the Urban Debate League official competitions of things like Big Questions, Lincoln Douglas, Public Forum, Policy Debate, all these formats that people get obsessed with that and not with the teaching of the rhetorical debate principles. So the Stoneman Douglas had the culture of teaching it to everyone, and I don't think that these people were big award winners like we just saw in that piece from CBS. I think that the people who survived the shooting were people who were like, I enjoy doing this because it gives me some power over disconnecting subjectivity and identity. I can articulate how I feel in ways that move you, even though you weren't there and you're distant, and you're also front-loaded to say, well, no, it's not this, it's not that, it's not, this is isolated, it's not the guns, it's not da-da-da, this kind of argumentation that we are all well too familiar with. So NSDA Nationals this year had about 6,700 people attended. That's a big event. And kudos to NSDA for running such a good event. And all the other events that we don't talk about for years and years and years and years, where there hasn't ever been an event this traumatic or this frightening at any of those. The worst thing I remember is being at the St. Louis Nationals and some kids set off the fire alarm in the hotel at like 3 a.m. It was very annoying. Being high school kids, they don't make the best choices, right? Even the best ones don't make the best choices. To have that many people in one place and have it work so smoothly and go so well and be so interesting and to be so educational is really quite a big accomplishment. That's all going to be overshadowed by what this Jaden guy did. That's going to be the focus, is like, okay, now we need to have security. And that discourse is going to be overblown. But I think NSDA is smart to wait. I've said that several times on the podcast. Smart to wait and then come up with a statement later on about what happened and how they're going to prevent it in the future. And then that should be the end of it, because we certainly don't want it to remind a lot of these students of the kind of school environment they may be coming from and transcending. and see the world, a different kind of event. So 6,700. This sounds like a lot. It's a big event. Kudos to them. Well done. But there are 17.3 million high school students in the United States. That's 3.94%. Less than 4% of the nation's high school students get to have the experience that you just saw on the CBS story about that national level of competition. That's out of a bigger percentage of people who are doing it and competing and didn't make it to nationals. And there's a lot of them out there. I don't know what that percentage is. I wasn't able to find that in my research. But I do think a lot of people participate in these activities. But it's still not going to be anything close to the amount of people who are in high school. So the question is, if this is so vital for future leadership, if this is so vital for our country, if this is so vital for global leadership, whether in a multinational, schooling, higher education, whatever the context, why is this not being argued for as part of the curriculum? Maybe they are doing that. But I think that there's the block here is that it's an elite sport for elites is the discourse that is being forwarded here. Not being forwarded intentionally. The discourse is kind of like the current or like a tide. And sometimes discourse is like a riptide. And you don't realize how far you're being pulled out when you're in it. You don't realize how much force it has on you. So it could be like that sometimes. And sometimes we feel like we're in charge of discourse and we're swimming with it, but we don't realize that the current's pushing us along and making it feel very easy to get where we're going. I think a lot of this is happening with these defenses of NSDA nationals and NSDA debate and speech in general as a kind of a brand that trains the future leaders. But then we only see like some questionable Supreme Court justices who maybe because of their politics, not because of speech and debate, were given the position they had, and some actors who I don't know if they got their movie star looks from the national tournament. If they did, I wish I had gone. I went to a very, very tiny high school in Texas. I went to Crowley High School in Crowley, Texas. And we did not know about national debate. We only thought it was like a regional Texas thing. The furthest we'd go is Arlington, Texas. Dallas, maybe. I remember going to the University of North Texas for a tournament once. It was amazing. That was like so big time. Went to Baylor University for debate camp when I was like 15. That was a big, big, big life-changing experiences for me. And it would be great if everyone had those experiences as part of the curriculum instead of what it trades off with. Nonsense state exams, nonsense state standards, nonsense curricular objectives and objective tests. I think one of the best tests of whether or not you know anything or that school has done its job is your ability to articulate what it means to you in a way that the audience is moved. And that's what the NSDA events do. They do it extremely well. Now, they only do it extremely well for less than 4% of the high school population. I mean, that's, there's something about journalism that they might, the morning journalists might not, David Begnaud might not cover it if it wasn't like, these are the best of the best, the most elite and special high school students ever. Because that's kind of like how national TV journalism works. If it was available to everyone, it's not that interesting. It doesn't become a story. But the fact that they call it a sport and they make allusions to the sport and they say these are the elite and the best, and then it becomes this incredibly important for our survival, as the director said, for our survival over the next 100 years is incredibly important. There's a bit of tension there of why this isn't offered to everyone and whether or not the money and the things done to create a big elite national tournament could be better spent in some kind of effort to create a curricular level stuff. Maybe, like I said, maybe they do it already, and they use the PR and the publicity of what the national tournament means to make that happen. I don't know, but it just seems it's always seemed odd to me, the national tournament stuff, about the importance of it, but only the elite can go. And also now we have things like YouTube and incredibly cheap, professional, amazing. Like I didn't spend very much money on my setup at all. And I have video and audio better than this podcast absolutely deserves to have. It's all very accessible and available. So why not do it like that and then have everyone able to attend it? There were some people talking about the emergency, the traumatic, the disruption of the Humorous Interp finals where they were watching the live stream and the live stream cut off and they assumed the worst. So there's some kind of broadcasting out, but what I want is more interactivity. I think that would be good. So what's my position on all this? I think that maybe you can have debate as a sport and debate as an activity that makes you a better person. And we have a great analog for that, and it's not Tom Brady, and it's not professional athletics, and it's not 3-time champion. It's the martial arts. The martial arts has competitions. The martial arts has competitions based on skill development, where you get a higher rank. And the martial arts is about unification of body and mind and becoming a good and ethical, decent person in the world by controlling your mind and your body and your breathing, being able to defend yourself and being able to protect others without causing irreparable harm. And I think that's the kind of ethics and honesty that these oratory students are reaching for. But they can't quite get there if they're going to be compared to the National Football League, which is why the NFL and the National Forensic League had to change their name. I have around here somewhere still an old bumper sticker from the classic days of the NSDA when they were the NFL. And it's NFL and it has a football with a crossed out, like a Ghostbusters crossed out band symbol over it. Which I thought was very, very funny. When I first went to the national tournament, I saw those. I was like, I need 2. Put one on my car, and I have one. I still have one floating around here somewhere, which is a classic now. I wonder if somebody would pay me a lot of money for it. Probably not. Anyway, that's it for the show this week. Please let me know what you thought. inthebinpodcast at gmail.com. Inthebin.com is our website, or you can leave comments on Spotify. You can also leave comments on YouTube. I actually would prefer the YouTube comments, to be honest, because I really do like YouTube the best out of all of it. But if you're a Spotify listener, keep on going. I'm going to keep putting it up here. If you're an Amazon Music listener or an iHeartRadio listener, I love you just as equally as all of my other children, which is not very much. Anyway, see you on the next episode of In the Bin. In the Bin is a production of International Debate Research Associates, LLC, who's totally responsible for all the content you hear. See you on the next one. Oh, and if you want to support the podcast financially, buymeacoffee.com/inthebinpodcast. See ya.
All that I need.